Kyle Juszczyk, Brock Purdy's fullback, on what makes Brock Purdy potentially a special player for the San Francisco 49ers. His thoughts on the quarterback competition. Is it even a quarterback competition yet for either number one or number two? Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We appreciate all the everydayers out there. If you want to be an everydayer, make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So everybody that is on any show ever that is a San Francisco 49er, Croc, is asked about the quarterbacks and Brock Purdy and who's going to be the starter, and asked about Sam Darnold and asked about Trey Lance. And Kyle Juszczyk was on with Rich Eisen. And Rich Eisen loves talking to 49ers players. He loves talking about the 49ers, which anybody nationally does because it gets a lot of traction. We're talking about it right now, right? And he asked Kyle Juszczyk about the quarterbacks. And what did Kyle Juszczyk do? He stopped in the middle of their upper body pump and gave the phone to his buddy George Kittle, who he was lifting weights with. And George Kittle had a snarky response and his normal funny self, because George Kittle is tired of questions about the quarterback. So first of all, I thought that was hilarious. And George Kittle's been tired about answering questions about quarterbacks for a long time. This goes back to pre-Brock Purdy days. And now he's got Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold in-house with Trey Lance. And the questions are kind of still the same as they were with Nick Mullins and Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance and all that. So he didn't say anything. He just kind of made fun of the question. But Kyle Juszczyk did speak about Brock Purdy, Croc. And he said the best way he could put it is that Brock Purdy is a football player. What does Kyle Juszczyk mean when he says that about his quarterback, Croc?
He actually said that's the highest compliment that he can give a football player.
Yes.
That he's a football player, right? And I thought that was interesting when we first kind of in our pre-production meeting that we had, you kind of brought that up. And I said, it really reminds me of how I talk about Jimmy Ward, right? Jimmy Ward for the 49ers was just the best way to sum it up, football player. And to me, that is one of the highest things that you can give a guy, because it feels like when we talk about Jimmy Ward, he has some things that you just can't quantify. He's not the biggest guy, doesn't get a whole bunch of interceptions, right? So, but regardless of that, I felt like, man, he's always one of the better safeties in the league. Like, I'll go to war with Jimmy Ward. I love the way he competes. I love how he talks trash. There's just something about him, that his leadership ability. He's a big film study type of guy. But ultimately, he's a football player. And when Kyle Juszczyk said that about Brock Purdy, that was the first thing I went to. Like, man, that's how I feel about Jimmy Ward. Guys like him. Jaquiski Tartt, I thought the same thing. Like, Jaquiski Tartt, football player. Now, I also, when I think about those guys, I say that because maybe I can't quantify some of the other things that they bring. Like, you can't just say, well, because of this or this or this, this is what makes them really good. I think sometimes with those guys that you say is, oh man, he's a football player, is because you can't describe exactly what makes him good. And I asked you, before, regardless of how good a football player is, even guys like Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt, who I thought were really good football players, would I take them over Minka Fitzpatrick, Derwin James? Like, hell no. So I think there is something to that where they're maybe missing some things, but regardless if they're missing some things, still to be able to categorize them as a good football player is the ultimate compliment.
I think the best part of the compliment there is that it's a fullback talking about a quarterback in that way. This is like, and like fullbacks aren't human battering rams like they used to be. But when you have the respect of the tough guys on your team, when you have the respect of linebackers and defensive linemen and offensive linemen and fullbacks, I think that means something when someone like that calls the pretty boy position, quarterbacks, calls you a football player.
Yeah,
so that's the first thing I thought of is that is a really big compliment based on what type of position is calling you that. But I will say at the same time, when you hear a GM speak about, hey, how come so-and-so made the 53rd spot on the roster versus the other guy? And they're always like, this could be just random special teamer guy that lasts 1 year in the NFL. Oh, he's just a football player. We love having this guy. So it's not the ultimate compliment because it's also like kind of every guy can be a football player. And a guy that does the dirty work is a football player. A guy that has no career and is not a superstar and is not leading you to championships is also a football player. So it's kind of, I see both sides of this. And do you call somebody a football player because you don't know what else to say about them because you don't know why they're good?
Well, if you don't know why they're good, but they're still good, does it matter?
No, as long as they're good. As long as
they're good. Okay. If you were to ask Travis Kelce what makes Patrick Mahomes good, what would Travis Kelce say?
Here's the thing: is I think Kelce might include he's just a baller, right? In as part of that, which is kind of a football player, kind of, I guess. But I think he would have more details and something else to be like, oh, dude, he's this and this. I know I can count on this and this and this and this. I think he'd go way more in detail and be like, oh, he's just a football player. I feel like just a football player is kind of how you talk about someone who's not that talented in some ways.
Right.
Well, it's like, put it this way.
It doesn't mean that they won't be good. We're going to have people listen to this and it's like, well, you guys downplay how he did this and this. And they're going to point out like a specific play, like, does just a football player do this? And it's like, actually, yes. Actually, yes, that is what they do.
And technically, they're all football players. And it's kind of like the thing when you get mad at GMs when they're talking before the draft. What are you guys looking for? What are you going to draft here? Oh, we just want football players.
We want good football players.
It's like so generic of a term. It's like you can't come up like Croc. If someone asked me, like, hey, what do you like about doing podcasts every day with Eric Crocker? I'm like, oh man, he's just a podcaster. Like, what? That's all you could say about me? I'm a podcaster. Man.
Brian Peacock, man, he has a great voice. He's actually really tall, man, taller when you see him in person. Man, the thoughts that he comes up with every day to talk about on the show, I don't know where he comes up with it, but man, always really good topics. And, it's really easy to bounce conversations back and forth off with them. And it just feels like two guys having a beer and just talking football.
Yeah. Hey, Peacock, what do you think about Eric Crocker? Oh, man, he's a podcaster.
I do think, and we're joking, but I think Juszczyk did truly mean it in a positive light. He might not be able to 100% explain what makes Brock Purdy tick in the sense of just the playmaking ability and some of the things. Because it's like, well, he's not very big. He's not the fastest guy. He has some quick twitch to him. But, man, he just makes plays. He's just a football player. And I think that's how he kind of saw it. The way he prepares, he loves it. He's grit. I hear Steve Young talk about it all the time. You got to have that grit and guile. And it's like, he has that grit.
He does have that grit and guile. Yeah, no, I definitely think it was meant as a compliment. And it was a compliment, especially coming from a guy like a fullback talking about his quarterback, saying you're a football player, I think is a huge compliment. And and they played better with Brock Purdy. So he's like, we were good. He was balling out. That's kind of how I take it. And so, and that's what we saw on the field with Brock Purdy. It's kind of hard to say exactly why he was so good. And that's why I can't wait to see a bigger sample of what Brock Purdy is after. I mean, he's not going to have a full season for him, but what it looks like for him to play a full season on the field, even though he didn't have his full off season to prepare for it.
Do you anticipate any slow start because of it? We saw that from Jimmy last year. A little different situation. Jimmy was throwing behind the building by himself. But once he was thrusted into the starting lineup, after the injury, actually came in, looked decent versus Seattle, and then the Broncos game,
bad, worst game,
maybe worst game of his career, right? Just all things considered, it was clear skies, the weather was great, and he's just running out the back of the end zone. Do you anticipate any type of slow start to the season from Brock? And if it does, we understand why he can't really have a true offseason.
Right. Yeah, I don't anticipate it. He came out hot from the start, for a rookie quarterback. That was pretty wild. So I don't know if I anticipate it, but I wouldn't be shocked, and I don't think people should be surprised or upset by some rust whenever it is that he does play, especially if it's only like, okay, you're cleared August 30th. Here's a week of practice. Go play football. That you would almost expect that you would kind of anticipate some rust, and if there's no rust, it's almost like, yeah. So I guess you should anticipate some rust with Brock Purdy coming back and not kill him for it if that does happen. I want to talk about somebody else who's got some quotes, and this is Sam Darnold, QB2, QB3, talking about himself and how ready he is in learning Shanahan's scheme next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs is so important for your business because these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And look, LinkedIn Jobs, everyone's on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Croc's on LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn, right? So why not go to where there are already where there's the biggest potential for finding someone who might be looking for a job, or maybe doesn't even realize they're looking for a job until they see your job in the hashtag purple hiring frame. LinkedIn profiles will spread the word to other profiles, letting them know that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on just the right candidates, just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering high quality hires versus leading competitors. So LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Sam Darnold was speaking with Jennifer Lee Chan of NBC Sports at, and this has kind of gone underreported. I feel like with all the Sam Darnold conversation, it's been a little wacky, Croc. So bear with me and tell me how you feel about what's going on with the dialogue around Sam Darnold. He was with Jennifer Lee Chan, and she interviewed him at George Kittle's Tight End University. And this is what he had to say about his own getting used to the system and getting ready for Kyle Shanahan's offense and how he felt being with the 49ers through the spring. He said, quote, "Yeah, it's been a work in progress. I thought I got better throughout camp and just got more comfortable with the system. So still got to study and go through the process of continuing to learn the system, but I'm excited for it. And it's been really fun so far." Like, that doesn't sound like a guy who's winning a job if there's a competition. He's talking about how he doesn't even have the system down yet, and he's still learning the system, and he can't wait for camp so he can continue to learn the system. And if you hear the dialogue that's happening with a lot of national media about the 49ers, it's like, oh, Sam Darnold probably leading Trey Lance. Trey Lance has been in the system already for a few years. And we're talking about spring practices, guys in shorts throwing the ball around. Like, how could anybody be leading a competition? How could the competition even have started already, Croc? So when I hear the national media, I really think that there's this game of telephone where you take a report here from a beat writer like Matt Mayoko saying, Sam Darnold might have the best arm talent in team history, right? And he's just kind of throwing that out there in a radio interview, not super serious about it. And then a national reporter follows the beat reporters closely, and they hear that, and they're like, "Oh, they signed Sam Darnold." Mayoko must be hearing this from somebody in the building. And then so Schefter's like, "Oh, it sounds like they kind of like Sam Darnold." And then Breer's like, "Oh, Mayoko and Schefter must be hearing something in the building." So then someone asks Albert Breer's like, "Oh, it's like this game of telephone where every time someone from the national media talks about the situation, the Niners love Sam Darnold even more and more." And it's like, we got to use common sense here. Dude's still learning the system by his own admission. And all they've done is a few OTAs and minicamp practices in shorts. How could anybody, even if it was an open competition, possibly be leading it? Because a competition hasn't even started. Training camp hasn't even started yet. And if you want to go by the pecking order, Trey Lance was the first guy taking the first snap still. So how is Sam Darnold ahead of anything right now? That whole national dialogue blows me away. And I just think it's a big game of telephone right now. And there's, if you use common sense, there's no way a competition, anybody could be leading a competition, because I don't think a competition has even started yet.
I would assume they're hearing that from someone, maybe someone inside that's just saying that, just the way that they maybe talk about it, right? And maybe they haven't just outright said, "Oh yeah, Sam Darnold, he's going to take the first snaps in training camp." But maybe just some of the ways that they speak about where he's at, as opposed to maybe Trey Lance, gives them the thought that, all right, maybe this guy is ahead. Now, I like to go back to my experiences, right? Because this isn't hearsay, this isn't he say, she say type stuff. This is what I saw. And I saw a quarterback, Geno Smith, that was drafted to really kind of overtake Mark Sanchez. Like, that was the goal with drafting. It was like Mark Sanchez is just like, all right, we've kind of seen enough. You know, he had went to 2 AFC championship games. We've seen enough. Right? We want Geno Smith to be the guy. During OTAs, there was never a competition. I don't even know how much of a true competition it was during training camp, right? And that was like those guys. It just, during OTAs, that's just a chance for everybody to get going. You don't even have all your players out there. You don't even have Debo on the field or Trent Williams on the field or anything. It's really just, hey, let's get up to speed with the playbook. Let's get everybody in shape. Let's get some reps in it. Hey, man, you go with the ones today. All right, you go with the ones today. But it's not truly a competition. Now, again, they'll be identifying certain things that they like from each guy, and they probably know a little bit more what they have with Lance, and they're seeing what steps he takes. But in the sense of it being a true competition, I have a hard time thinking that that is exactly what's going on during training camp. I mean, during mini camp. They're just trying to hey, man, let's run these plays. Let's kind of get in the groove. Hey, man, we got some rookies. Throw these guys in there. Hey, Travarius Ward, you know what? Don't even worry about practicing. Elijah Mitchell, don't even worry about practicing. We'll just play the other guys, and let's just get through mini camp. They're just trying to get through mini camp.
Let's get guys some reps, so when training camp starts, everyone knows where to go and line up.
I don't even think that's it. It's just, we have to be here for mini camp. We have to be here. Like, it's kind of mandated, and hey, let's use it as a time to get some reps. But I don't think it's, hey, you missed this throw, you're in trouble. This guy's going to start getting more reps than you.
No, I totally agree. When you say between Mark Sanchez and Geno Smith, there wasn't really a competition, or the competition was a sham, I don't remember that year and how things went. Are you saying that Geno just was given the job and Mark Sanchez had no shot?
They ultimately put Mark Sanchez on IR with his shoulder injury.
Oh. Why didn't they put you on IR instead of giving you the pink slip?
They can. Typically what they do is they give guys what's it called?
Injury settlement or injury?
Injury settlement.
Is there another word for it? No, it's a settlement, right? Like, they come to some agreement where you get waived, but with an injury designation.
Right. And then some guys end up coming back. My guy, Royce Adams. Royce Adams, the year prior, he had tore his ACL. And then it's kind of like they waived him with an injury thing, and then they were able to bring him back, but he had to miss the whole year. I think the 49ers tried to do that with DJ Reed, and it didn't work.
Yes. Yep. And because I think they did it with Richie James as well. And I think if you do that, you have to stay on IR all year.
Right.
So you're gone. And DJ Reed was like, no, I'm coming back. So they just waived him regular. Is that what happened?
No, DJ Reed, somebody claimed him. It was like they waived him to try to bring him back and have him on IR.
But I think when you're waived injury, I'm thinking of something else.
Yeah, for the injury,
IR where you think he's gone for a whole season.
Yeah, for the injury thing, you can waive them and then they can come back on IR. They tried to do that with DJ Reed, and the team was like, we'll claim him. And remember, he got healthier much sooner than anticipated over there with Seattle.
I tried to stash him.
Yeah, they tried to stash him. So, yeah, but with Geno and Mark, just seeing it, and And as much as there was talk, because here's the funny thing about being in the NFL, every morning you go in there and I look out the window and I see Sal Paolantonio and he's reporting. But we're eating breakfast or we're eating lunch and I look up and I see him on the TV. So I see him out there reporting. I look up, I see him on the TV, what he's reporting on, and he's talking about this quarterback competition that nobody in the building is even thinking about.
Wow. So he was not, nobody was leaking him correct information.
Maybe the offensive guys, and another thing people don't think about, offense and defense, you're kind of two different teams in the NFL. Like, I think they think everybody kind of intermingles and everybody's just buddies. And you might have one guy that you're cool with on the other side of the ball, but you don't really interact a whole lot with the offense. You really don't. I mean, the most you come together is like a team meeting prior to your actual meetings. And then when you're actually competing against each other in one-on-ones. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot of interaction between the two sides, except for maybe some scout team type stuff.
All right,
but even then, we use a lot of the defenders. Like, I got pictures with me and you see Antonio Cromartie like running with me. I'm a scout person. You know what I'm saying? So not a whole lot of interaction between both sides. So I don't know what was being said, and I actually have my guy. I can call Joe Collins right now. He'll tell me everything, and maybe I'll get Joe on the phone. That's my dog. All but right. Exactly what was going on, but it didn't feel like anybody in the building was actually talking about it. Mark was hella cool, Gino was cool, and it was just, they were just out there. I didn't. But as much as it was being talked about on TV on ESPN about Mark Sanchez and Gino, that wasn't the feeling I got in-house. And maybe that's what these 49er guys are talking about, where they keep getting asked about something that is made a much bigger deal on the outside than it is inside the building.
I want to talk about the idea, Croc, next, that the 49ers might have found a new path forward of the less expensive quarterback, the cheap quarterback in perpetuity next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by LinkedIn. Appreciate everybody out there that is locked into us every single day. Make sure you check out LinkedIn Jobs. Make sure you subscribe up on Locked On YouTube, and you can find us everywhere you get your podcasts. Okay, Croc, let's get into this here about, and I actually want to reference here David Lombardi of The Athletic, and nice graph form that he put this on here, showing what it looks like with a pie graph of the percentages of what the 49ers are spending per position. If I could click the right thing and bring this up on my screen so I can read it. Maybe I'll put it up on the screen for everybody else too. So basically, the 49ers quarterback position is only 6.8% of the roster. Running backs, 6.4%, really similar. Wide receiver, 9.2% of cap spending in this season. Tight end is 9.9% of the roster spending. Offensive line is 18.3%. A lot of that is very expensive left tackle who's making, toward the top of the league money there at left tackle is Trent Williams. Special teams is earning 2.3%, a lot less now with no Robbie Gould. Defensive backs are making 9.6%. Linebackers making 9.7%. And the defensive line, the most, a whopping 27.7%. And that is absolutely going to go up when Nick Bosa signs his new contract, or that'll probably actually drop it this season, maybe go up.
Armstead's paid a lot. Hargrave's paid a lot.
Yes. Yeah. Those are the
and
two.
Nick Bosa was a top pick. So, I mean,
he's still not cheap. Right.
Relative to the rest of the roster, he's paid a lot, especially when you have the cheap quarterbacks.
And they gave Darnold a little bit of guarantees. He'll make more, similar to Garoppolo's contract last year. But 6.8%, one of the lowest position groups on the entire team, Croc. And you've got Purdy. You've got still, even though he's a number 3 overall pick and he makes a decent chunk, he's not making what a veteran quarterback would make, especially a starting veteran in Trey Lance. So the 49ers, when you put them all together, still don't have an expensive room, and Brock Purdy being the least expensive of all of them. We've been asked this on Twitter a few times. Do you think this is something that Kyle Shanahan should want, and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan should say, you know what? We're getting to NFC Championship games anyway. Why would we spend a whole bunch of money on a quarterback? Let's start going cheap at quarterback. Let's spend on running back since we love those so much. And let's treat quarterbacks like other teams around the league are treating running backs, get a few cheap ones in, and go to NFC Championship games.
Okay, so I've been asked this question before, and I'll kind of turn the question back on you. How do you continue to stay cheap at the quarterback position?
That's the problem I have with this theory is like, it's okay for right now. And like, you want to sign somebody short-term, you have a cheap quarterback for a couple of years. That's fine. Brock Purdy's rookie year's already over. He's got a 4-year contract. He's not playing year 4. If he plays year 2 and 3, like he did year 1, he's not playing year 4 without a new contract. So that means you have 2 more years of cheap quarterback. And who knows, maybe even by year 3, if he has one good year this year, maybe next offseason, like, wait a second, guys. I've already seen how quickly you can get hurt in the NFL. We got to start talking about something here, right? And so, and actually, the collective bargaining agreement has rules. You might not be able to re-sign rookies until after their 3rd season, or maybe it's during the 3rd season. But anyway, at some point, he's not playing the last year of his contract cheap. So you might be able to look ahead and say, we can get away with some things and maneuver right now, but we're going to have an expensive quarterback at this point. And if you don't want to have an expensive quarterback, probably means you don't have a good quarterback. And I don't think you want to jettison a good quarterback just to have a cheap quarterback, because just having a cheap quarterback, I don't think is any kind of strategy that should ever work. And on top of that, Croc, I would say Kyle Shanahan has already shown us that he's tried so hard to get a quarterback. And even if they screw this Trey Lance thing up, whether it was the development or the original plan that they put in place, they spent 3 first-round picks on a quarterback. And that should get you an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson or a Deshaun Watson, right? That's whatever the best quarterback available is. If you spending 3 first-rounders should be able to get you that and get you in just about anywhere in the draft you want to be, unless the Jaguars, are not willing to trade away from Trevor Lawrence, or maybe whoever gets the first pick next year isn't willing to trade away from Williams, at quarterback. So all that to say, even Kyle Shanahan doesn't believe that, because he's tried to go out and get a quarterback, but maybe he's learned from that and he wants to shift away from that idea. They went and got Jimmy, paid him a lot. Then they went and got Trey Lance. So they've spent on quarterbacks. They've spent resources. And then you look at McVay, he had a first-round quarterback, and that wasn't good enough for him. And he's actually and Goff is actually playing better than we thought. He was just a throw-in. He's actually, like, the Lions are looking at him like, Goff is our franchise quarterback maybe right now. They didn't draft a quarterback this year. They spent 2
Goff wasn't bad for the Rams. Like, he played well. That is really weird how he was talked about during that time. And I remember telling people, like, y'all act like Jimmy Garoppolo is this tier above Jared Goff. I mean, Jared Goff won a lot of, like, they were viewed different, but they were kind of, in my eyes, like the very same tier, in the sense of they're winning a lot of games with this guy. They went to a Super Bowl with this guy.
And even still, they went and tried to get better and got Matthew Stafford.
Right.
So I can't see a path forward being good for a long time, or potentially being great without an expensive quarterback, unless you really get to the point where Kyle Shanahan's been through this and is like, you know what? Give me Brandon Allen and whatever scrap heap Sam Darnold type of quarterbacks. There's going to be another guy next year that was highly thought of, that has some physical talent. I think I can fix all these guys, and I think I can win with any of these guys. So give me a Brandon Allen who's backed up by Nick Mullins, and then a Sam Darnold. Like, can you go forward like that and just build the rest of your roster? I don't think so. I would rather go that route than pay Daniel Jones $30 million a year. So there's some quarterbacks you maybe shouldn't pay, but I think those are individual decisions for the individual quarterbacks. But the idea that you can just go forward and have a cheap quarterback position, it's too important. And if you get a good one, you just hold on to them for dear life.
My thing is, how do you stay cheap at the quarterback position? So do you just say every year we're going to draft a 4th, 5th, 6th round
Yep.
quarterback. That
You would have to continually have rookie contract quarterbacks, and you would always
try to find somebody that you hit on, like where, oh, this guy's really good, and then you kick your guy that's about to be expensive. Let's say we'll use Brock Purdy as an example. In 2 years, Brock Purdy is going to get paid $50 million a year. And you're like, nope, we want to stay young. So right now, do you continue to draft that younger guy until you see something in one of them in practice where it's like, oh, this guy can be good? We're not going to pay Brock Purdy when it's time to pay him. We'll let him walk. And then this guy, we'll have him for 2 years, and then boom, we're going to let him walk. That would be the only way. And I just find it extremely hard to continue to find these mid-round guys that are good enough to where you can let this other guy walk that you really like. The other thing that you really kind of get in trouble with is signing that quarterback that maybe isn't like franchise. Let's say Kirk Cousins, right? As I know Kyle thinks the world of him, and Kirk Cousins, solid quarterback. The Washington Commanders were right with the way that they went about it, but they just didn't execute that last part because it's hard to find good quarterbacks. But remember, I mean, they're like, he's not worth paying this long-term contract to where we can't build around him. Like, he's not that guy.
Well, they screwed up. They had a window. They had a window to do it, but they didn't do it early enough. Then he played too good the next year. Then it was like, oh, now we're in a new tier to pay you. We can't do that. So then they went to the franchise tag and then another franchise tag. And so I think they were right not to pay him then, but I think they could have paid him at a time earlier that seemed like maybe a lot. But then when you realize and you look at contracts, kind of like the Jimmy contract, remember he was the highest paid NFL player of all time. And then a few months later, he was like 5. And then the next offseason, he wasn't even the top 10 anymore. And so it happened really quick. And I think for Kirk Cousins, if they would have signed him after his 3rd year, he would have been cheap. And then, versus what other quarterbacks are getting paid. And that would have been the time to sign him. But since they didn't strike then, as I understand it, there was conversations and they just, they, for whatever reason, I don't know. And maybe he was asking more than I think that he was asking. But at the time, even if you paid him more than what you would have expected for Kirk Cousins after his 3rd year, that would have been cheap compared to what he ended up signing two off seasons later or 3 off seasons later after he, went through 2 franchise tags and got paid by Minnesota. And he's played it so well that if he stays healthy again and has another good year, Kirk Cousins is going to be, not only is he not going to be cheap, he's going to be making $40+ million a year. He's going to get huge money this offseason or next offseason.
That's the hard part, right? Where and then you get in this spot where you have to count on this guy, and it's like Kirk Cousins is just not that guy, So right. If you are going to pay a quarterback, it better be a guy that you feel comfortable with losing some pieces, and you won't miss a beat. And those guys are very rare. So, I mean, GM Crocky. And this is why people give up a lot for a guy like Trey Lance, because you hope he ends up being his guy because, okay, dang, he didn't, or he hasn't been that guy, or he's probably not going to be that guy. Can Brock Purdy be that guy? And if he can't, then you got to strike now with your window, like with the roster the way it is, and you got to hope you get that dub, because ultimately you're going to end up having to pay him $50 million a year. And when you pay him $50 million a year, the roster is not going to look like what it looks like right now.
No doubt. And then you have to, okay, so now you're paying him $50 million and some other players who are key, especially specifically with the 49ers and where they're at now, 2025, different roster. Brock Purdy, is he going to be pulling the train, right? And just leading you to victory? Like other teams who are paying their quarterbacks a lot with a worse roster behind him? That's a tough decision. So
even Jalen Hurts, like Jalen Hurts right now, he's still as well as he played last year, right? So this is not just a Brock Purdy thing. Jalen Hurts played extremely well last year. They paid him a ton of money. It's going to kick in at some point. And the one thing that have really helped them, that has kind of hurt the 49ers, they had a bunch of first-round picks over the last so many years. So they've been able to kind of load up on some of those young, talented guys so they can still be relatively cheap. But even then, a few years into his contract, it might be harder to keep some of the guys that they just drafted.
Right. Like,
and he has to be good enough, and he has to be where I think right now, is he the purest of passers? I don't think so. So there's still levels to his game that he has to continue to keep getting better at, so that he's ready when his contract, when it really hits and you start losing some of these guys. Has he developed that aspect of his game?
Yep. Yeah. So Jalen Hurts in 2 years, when either AJ Brown is going to be gone because his contract's up, or Devontae Smith is too expensive to re-sign. It's kind of like the Debo Ayuk thing. Right. One of those guys is gone. Lane Johnson's not on your blind side anymore, or not your blind side, but he's not on your right side pass protector. Jason Kelce, this is his last year. And you're carrying, now you have to be good enough to be carrying it. Without those guys, where would Philadelphia be? Was Jalen Hurts so good he carries the team, or did it all just work together? And so now you can't pay guys because you're paying your quarterback $50 million. And
you know who's a perfect example of this? And I brought up Kirk Cousins. He's one of those guys. Dak Prescott. You talked about that window of paying him. They had a chance to kind of maybe try to pay him cheap. He's like, nope, I'm not signing that. He ended up franchise tag. He got hurt. They still paid him $40+ million, and it got a little weird. People forget.
No Amari Cooper.
He was a rookie of the year, right? He was rookie of the year, 26 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, whatever it is, 4 interceptions. Everybody's like, oh my goodness, he's so great. The next year, what happened? Tyron Smith was hurt, kind of banged up, having back issues. Dude showing Chi-Chi's Ezekiel Elliott, he got suspended 7 games.
He's showing tummy, not Chi-Chi.
No, he pulled the girl's thing, and then he missed 7 games. and then so you had that happen. All of a sudden, Dak Prescott looks like this blue quarterback, and it's like, well, I lost the guys that really helped me be good. See what 8-8, he struggled to throw for 200 yards in a game. It didn't look great, right? Then he got some of those guys back. They were loaded. Defense plays well. You see him win games, but if you ask the 49ers right now, hey man, would you rather have Dak Prescott or Brock Purdy? Would it be 98% Brock Purdy? Like they think Dak sucks. And there was a time where Dak looked like the greatest young quarterback ever.
And the best part, Croc, is when you let Purdy walk, you get those sweet, sweet 3rd-round comp pick for him. Niners love the comp game. Let's go. All right. We got to get out of here. Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Croc and I back, not tomorrow, holiday off tomorrow. Everyone have a safe 4th of July. Don't blow off your fingers. We want all your digits back with us on Thursday, Wednesday, whenever we come back. Talk to you then, right here, Locked On 49ers.
Subscribe to this video